So today we have Lauren Muñoz. She is the author of Suddenly a Murder. This is a YA murder mystery, that of the heyday of the golden age of mysteries, a la Agatha Christie, what have you. But let me read you this little snippet that got me intrigued about this book. It says, in addition to its commercial appeal, Lauren Munoz's protagonist is a clever, savvy, first-generation Mexican-American girl who goes up against an equally brilliant Mexican investigator. Right? So I was like, oh, word, this is a murder mystery, golden age, Agatha Christie type, Knives Out type stuff, but with that flavor and that angle. Yes, I want to read more. So read it, well, listen to it, and then was asked to see if, to have her on. So she is. And in this episode, we discuss how she was growing up in Georgia and South Texas, her journey from being an attorney to an author, her love and nerding out about the golden age detective mysteries from 1920s, and how important was it for her to have first gen Mexican protagonist, and so much more. You're gonna love this conversation. It's a YA book, but don't get it twisted. Good writing is good writing. The fact that me, Raka, the Supernatural Bear, we all enjoyed this speaks to the talent of storytelling. So yeah, Lauren Munoz. Let's do this. Lauren, it's so nice to, virtually meet you. Super excited to talk about you, your history, and this amazing book. But let's start off by, how are you doing? ¿Cómo estás?
Good, great. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So, where are you born and raised?
So I was actually born in Northern California, and I was raised a number of places. Lived in Georgia a couple times, Puerto Rico
Mm.
for a little bit, Texas a couple times. And I'm actually back in Southern California living, so moved around a bit.
Oh, nice. And
hmm
so, what's a little bit about your background? Obviously, are Latina. What's that? Are you first gen, third gen? What's that story?
Yeah, I guess my family's been in South Texas for a long time, for a few
Mm.
generations. So, sort of on the border, out on the ranches there. So, in terms of generation, honestly, I've never actually thought about what generation. I'm certainly not a, first generation. Like I said, my parents and my grandparents have been here for a while. They were living down there when
I
when the
think
border
you
changed, right?
froze.
So they were living in Mexico, and then, of course, after revolution and different things, they were living in Texas.
Right.
so you know, yeah. So the background is from Mexico, but yeah, South Texas has been that for a few generations now.
Nice.
hmm
That's fascinating. I heard someone speak about how they don't know what generation, but their family has been in South Texas forever.
hmm
Like just like how you said, like it's Mexico until it turned into
Right.
the
Yeah, I know.
United
Yeah. Yeah.
States.
They've been there the whole time, but the country
Exactly.
changes around them.
Exactly. As it
Yeah. Yeah.
does.
As it does. Yeah.
Um, so I mean, you're in Southern California now as an
hmm
adult, but out of the many different places that you traveled to, during your formative years, which is your favorite? Is Southern California your favorite, or at different times, different places?
Yeah, so, I only lived in California for a very short period of time when I was born. So I never really grew up in California. So
Ah.
I mostly grew up in Georgia and Texas. Um, it's, I, you know, the most of the formative years were in Georgia. It was sort of in this community south of Atlanta, maybe 40 miles south. It was like they refer to it as like a golf cart community. So
Hmm.
there were like 100 miles of golf cart trails, and everybody owns a golf cart to get around. You like drive on your
Nice.
golf cart to go to the grocery store. It's an unusual city, full of a lot of Delta pilots. So I guess, and I'm not sure if it's the same now, but Delta was the hub. I mean, Atlanta was the hub of Delta, and so yeah, a lot of pilots, and they work odd schedules. So there were like golf courses and golf carts, and it was sort of like a planned community in Georgia. So
Ah,
that was an interesting place to, grow up. It was really nice. All the roads are really wide, so like I learned to drive on these really broad roads. Like moving to Texas afterwards, I was like gripping the steering wheel, trying to get on the highways because I'd never seen anything like that. I'd never driven in anything like that. So it was kind of in that sense, idyllic little secluded place to grow up.
nice.
Mhm.
So being, from the South, Texas and Georgia, was it a culture shock to move to Southern California or not at all?
No, no, it wasn't. And I moved other places before that. I went to law school in Chicago and worked there for a couple years, and then I've lived in Denver a couple times. In fact, I just moved back to Southern California. I lived in LA for a few years, and then moved to Denver, and then back to Southern California. So, and then I lived as an adult in Texas for a while, and I like that a lot better.
Mm.
It was really nice actually to work there. They have I don't think people, I lived in Dallas. I don't think people know that they have a really amazing restaurant scene and like cultural scene. They have a great opera house. They have a great symphony. They've got a lot of it's a really interesting, diverse city. So I like that a lot, actually, as an adult, surprisingly. So,
Nice. Dallas has been in the air. And I
mhm.
think if things go in a certain way, I'll be visiting there. And lately, I've been flying out a lot, and I think 2 or 3 times this year, my layover was in Dallas. So
Okay.
it's in the air. Something's in the air. So
Yeah.
speaking of going to law school, I wanted to talk to you about when I did my research, you were a teacher, a
Mhm.
lawyer, and now an author. How did that come about?
Yeah. So out of college, I had a professor, a wonderful professor, Professor Michelson, and I was out of college. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go to law school or graduate school. And she said, what she did was teach for a couple years and sort of work, get an idea of what working life was like, get a better sense of, herself and to get a better sense of myself. And she suggested doing that and then kind of making a call. I taught high school English and debate for a bit, and then taught bilingual elementary school at the school where my dad taught bilingual elementary school. So we like team taught next to each other for a couple of years. And then I decided that I'd rather go to law school than grad school. And so I went up to Chicago, Northwestern, and went there for a few years, worked for a little bit. And out of law school was when I really sort of returned to writing. When I was a child, I enjoyed writing a lot. I told little stories to my friends. I wrote them down on notebooks, all these little stories. And, I actually had a librarian in elementary school that you would write a story and illustrate it, and she would bind it. She laminated it and
Oh,
then bound it, and she had, an author bio and all the stuff, like it was a, real little book. And that was sort of my first taste of, the love of putting together a story. But I dropped it for a long time, and never. It was once I got out of law school and started working that I considered returning to it, and started writing manuscripts then. And in between, I would take long breaks too. It's really, I found it very difficult to work such long hours. I was in these big law firms that have really,
mm.
substantial hours and pressure requirements. And so I found it difficult to do both. So I would write a little bit then, but mostly I would like do a job for a while, not write, and then quit and write a manuscript, and then go to another job and do it for a while, and then quit and then write a manuscript. So I wrote off and on for a bit, and then went part time a few years back. And then I started really writing in earnest. And I wrote Suddenly a Murder in 2020. So that
Oh,
was.
wow.
Mhm.
And then you wrote in 2020. came out September, right? Am I correct? Of this
Yeah, it
year.
takes a long time. I sent it out around to agents in 2021, early 2021, got an agent mid 2021, and then we sold it that year. And yeah, it takes a couple years afterwards for all the process of editing and, getting a cover and getting it printed and all that. It's a while.
And did you love the process? I mean, I have had different authors on here and I have really good friends that are authors. Did you love the process of picking your cover? Did you have even any say in that being in it was your debut book?
Um, Not really. I mean, they certainly they passed it over, to make sure that we didn't like hate it or anything like that. And obviously we didn't. But no, I mean, they very much, they consulted on the artists like, hey, here's their portfolio. Is this interesting, to you? So I think it's more of a, I mean, it's their job to know what the market is like. It's their job to know what attracts readers in terms of a cover.
Right.
And so I think they want you to be happy. And so they run things by you. So if I'd really hated it, I get the impression that, it could have gone in a different direction. But otherwise, you just sort of, they show you what's going on and stuff like that. And everyone's like, yay. And then it goes. So
So for the idea, the foundation of Suddenly a Murder, was it something you've always had since way back in the days, like when you were younger, or it did everything kind of come together when you started writing, when you had the initial idea? Was it, more recent and then you wrote it? How did that go about?
yeah, it all did come together. It wasn't an idea I'd had for a while. The very first manuscript I wrote many years ago was a mystery. It was a middle grade mystery, though, so it wasn't a murder mystery. And then I didn't write mysteries after that. It was in 2019, I guess I had started doing a really big Agatha Christie reread, listening to them actually on Audible. Hugh Fraser does wonderful work on them. And so I'd go on my walk or go on my little jog and, listen to them. And at the same time, at the early 2020, I had read One of Us is Lying with a Friend. And I was thinking, I'd been writing, YA manuscripts, and I thought, I just wish there was some way to put these things I love so much about all this golden age detective fiction, all that detective fiction written in the 20s and 30s. If I could just put all those elements in something contemporary, like how would that work? I like contemporary stuff. I want to write a contemporary book, but how do you get the 1920s in a contemporary book?
Right.
So I started to think of ideas of how that might work and landed on this one, and then just start writing it almost immediately.
Amazing. And do you feel, knowing that your history of being a lawyer and having this be a murder mystery, I'm sure, did that help out a lot when it came to those specific parts of the story?
Yeah, it does. Although part of what you do is you know where you are putting plot over reality, right? Basically, you know the moments in which you're like, well, that wouldn't happen. That's illegal. So you're more aware of that. But yeah, I think that in terms of crafting that narrative and thinking about the process, and crime has always been an interest of mine. I was on the criminal. There was like you have journals, law journals at law
Hmm.
school. So I was on like the Journal of Crime and Criminology at law school. So it's always been sort of like a particular, interest of mine. So yeah, I think it helps in term, conceptually. And there are some things also, especially in terms of like forensics, that as I move on, I'll be, utilizing, which you kind of, know as a lawyer. I'm not a criminal lawyer, I never was, but I did some pro bono work in that area because it was just interesting to me. So
Right. And
yeah.
that was one thing I forgot to ask. What kind of law did you practice when you were a practicing attorney?
Yeah, I did some M&A work and real estate, mostly real estate. Some litigation work. I mostly did real estate, but I dabbled a bit in litigation because it was always so interesting to me. There were all these projects that you can be on. They're called document reviews, and a lot of people hate them, but I loved them because you're getting an insight into an entire area of a business oftentimes, or a university, or a million different things that you might be reviewing, the documents, because somebody files a lawsuit, they hold the documents, and then people review them to see if you should turn them over to the other side, basically. And so they have teams of lawyers that decide whether they're privileged documents. Nobody else can see these are between us and our lawyers, let's say. And but yeah, you get a you're it's yeah, I mean, most people don't get access to other people's email boxes or inboxes. They're little insights into how people live and how businesses run and stuff. So I always enjoyed that part of it. So I didn't practice that, but I put myself on document reviews a lot so that I could get that aspect of it.
Nice. And so have you always had this love and respect for, like you said, like, the mysteries from the golden age, and you're like, how do I get these things that I love the 1920s, and are you an old soul, Lauren, or did someone introduce you to this? Like, where does that come from? What's the root of that?
Yeah, I picked up my first Agatha Christie off my dad's bookshelf. So he had, books. He was like a great books major, but he also had some of those, popular fiction books. And so I picked up, the first one from him, and then that was like middle school or high school. It was sometime in my teens that I did that. So I always loved the puzzle mystery a lot. And I mean, I was a huge Nancy Drew fan, and read some Hardy Boys and stuff. So there were other early mystery series that I did love, but yeah, I like early golden age puzzle mysteries where you've basically often kind of the country house manor murders, where you've got a
Right.
secluded location, you've got your circle of suspects, everyone's a suspect. It's very um, everything circles around the victim. There's a victim that everybody hates, and that creates a lot of drama. And then you, as the author, and it's super fun to write these because you're dropping clues that people don't know are clues. You've got to have a lot of misdirection and things like that. So I always
Right.
liked that as a reader because it's a very engaging experience. You're kind of it's you versus the author, right? They're trying to lead you
Right.
astray and you're trying to find the right path, and it creates this dynamic that I really enjoy. So and I also just find that time period very interesting in terms
Right.
of the history of England, in particular, sort of between the two world wars, a lot of social upheaval, a lot of social changes, and I find the class dynamics of that period extraordinarily interesting, and of course the aesthetics. I love the dresses and the the cocktail
Yes.
hours and things like that. The life of leisure has always been interesting.
Yes, the life of leisure. It's funny because we were lit my husband and I, who's like super picky. So the fact that he loved your book as much as the experience of
Oh
your
yeah.
book as much as I did, I was like, what do you think? Because I knew I loved it. But when we were listening to it, and they were figuring out, she was revealing, Cassidy was revealing like what was happening, and it was like full immersion, the costumes, like the food, everything. I was like, I want to do that. Like, that
Yeah.
sounds like something, that period, those clothes. So I wanted
Mhm.
to ask you, how much research, how much authentic, like how accurate, first, let me say, I when I was listening to your book, I was like, ooh, I want to watch, how come I don't know about this movie, The Secret of the Ruby Dagger? I need to watch this. That doesn't exist, right? That's like,
No,
you
it
made that
doesn't.
up.
I
And
made it up. Yeah.
I was like, how come I don't know about this? And I was like, I need
Yeah.
to watch this. So how accurate, so we know that you made that up, but how accurate are the costumes and the descriptions of the costumes of that time?
Yeah.
How much did you nerd out, Lauren?
A lot, so much. Yeah, so much nerding out. Yeah, I mean, I tried to make it as, sort of accurate as possible in terms of the descriptions. I did a little bit, melded into the 1930s a little bit, only because, so, I found that there were two good ways to, sort of research. You do your, primary research where you're, looking at the actual pictures of, descriptions, and, you're doing your first line book research. But there's also a huge amount of contemporary, especially movies, that they're big budget enough where they have, people who consult, historians who consult on that and
Right.
try to go for those period details. So I sort of blended, watching those, films and TV shows and getting the feel of the aesthetic,
Mm,
and then matching it up to the primary sources and seeing where it overlapped.
right.
But, one of the things is that if you read enough of these books, and it's not just Agatha Christie, there's, a number of Golden Age authors that are really good. She's just the one that, of course, is the most famous. But you get especially because they were writing about often upper class, people, and their books were contemporary. Like, we think of them as historical because it was so long ago, but they were writing about their time period. In
Right.
1926, they're writing about 1926
Right.
often. So if you read enough of those, you can get a real sense of the sort of dynamics of the lifestyles of, these
Right.
characters. And to the extent that they were using them for plot reasons, I wanted my book to reflect those old books. So those old books are also primary sources, for me, so that it kind of has that feel for people reading it,
Right.
to kind of be like, oh, this has that, vibe of the time period of Agatha Christie, that sort of thing. So
I love that. You can tell, by reading it, by listening to it, that you're such a fan, right? Like I was like, oh, she's nerding out. Like she loves this. Like she's an old soul. She was introduced to this. Something happened. So I wanted to point this part out. There's different descriptions that, I've seen of the book, but I think this was very intriguing to me and made me want to read it even more. And it was this little section here that says, in addition to its commercial appeal, Lauren Muñoz's protagonist is a clever, savvy first-generation Mexican-American girl, which is, you're like, what? In this, I'm all about it. And then you go into who goes up against an equally brilliant Mexican investigator. How was that always from jump? You knew, oh, I'm going to put, someone Latinx, Latina, however you identify. Was that always a part of the story? Was that something you added after, midway? How did that come about?
yeah, that was always part of the story. That was sort of the originating idea.
Mm,
And my interest in writing the originating idea. And something that I've always loved about the Agatha Christie books is Poirot is also an immigrant. He's a refugee during the war, and so in part of sort of representing these books in my book, and taking all these pieces of them to make it, I wanted to have a Poirot character, and for me it made, of course, the most sense to have a Mexican investigator who came in and had sort of the with the story of border crossings and things like that. So I wanted to have that feel of somebody who has access, like Poirot has access to England. He lives there, and he's whatever, but he's never quite entirely accepted, right? And
right.
he uses that to his advantage, and that's kind of how I feel. It is, I think that's helpful when an investigator is sort of underestimated. And it made sense
Totally.
to me that a lot of these rich kids would, underestimate her, because
Totally.
she's speaking with an accent, or she's clearly not from here, and she, that sort of thing. So I wanted to include that dynamic to sort of mirror the Poirot-ness of it all.
Right. Yeah, because it would change the whole vibe if you had an immigrant, but say like they're European, right? Where they're looked
Hmm.
at differently. So
Yeah.
I loved that about your story. And the names. I want to talk about the names. Blaine. Where did you get that name? Do you know a Blaine? Because if not, I automatically think of Blaine from Pretty in Pink. Let's discuss.
Interesting. No, I'm not even sure. I have no idea where I got that name. That's funny. I mean, I've seen that movie. Maybe secretly earworm from my youth. Uh,
Right.
but yeah, no, I don't remember where I got that one. Sometimes with names, I ask my sister. So I don't remember who came up with that one, honestly. I'd have to go
When I
back and
heard that
look at
name, I was
my
like, that's so
text.
perfect. A rich,
Mm.
affluent kind of name, Blaine. And then I was like, automatically. And I was like, she's so young. I don't think she even knows that movie where the famous Ducky says, Blaine, that's not a name. It's a major appliance. So every time I hear that name Blaine, I think of that.
I forgot that. I haven't seen that movie in years. Yeah, yeah, maybe so. Yeah, no, I think that, I mean, I was trying to think at the time of rich person names for sure. That's what you've got. Like, and Blaine was that, Fergus. These are names that I would think of as
Right.
like, if somebody came up to me and was like, my name's Fergus, it'd be like, oh, I see, you're rich. Where's your yacht? Like,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. Where do you summer?
right? Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Awesome. Okay, well, we have some questions and comments from the audience
Oh,
that, this is the section that we get into now. So, the first one, I would first like to say what a joy it was to bring all those characters to life in the audio world. And did she have any personal reference for any of the characters? I'm thinking of Pilar de Leon, for example, and this is by Deanna Bustello, the phenomenal voice actor who did the audio version of your book.
oh gosh, she was amazing.
Amazing.
Amazing. I listened to that. I was like, yeah, because I hadn't heard it. And so I actually got my own copy of it on the thing. And I was like, I want to listen to this. And I was just like, I'm like cooking and listening to it. And I'm like getting involved. And I'm like, I don't even remember reading this. This is a good story. So yeah, no, she was fantastic. In terms of the characters, no, I don't, in terms of the types, types, I certainly took them from that, the golden age sort of types, because a lot of times you do see, a certain type of character kind of like you repeated, a certain type of character repeated. But in terms of like personal or pulling from someone personally, not really. Pilar was mostly, inspired by Poirot, and just sort of gave her my own, twist on what I wanted her to be. And I, a lot of, with a mystery, you've got to balance, you're balancing creating characters with what you need them to do. So,
Right.
basically when I write it, I start with, who's going to die. And then what everybody's problem is with that person. And then I, spread out from there. So that, creates a lot of their characterization, a lot of their character, because what their, beef is with Blaine is, sort of, it is how their character, develops. And then, part of the character develops in writing as they start to interact with people, as you start to see them in your head. Like when I'm first drafting and creating, the stories, these little scenes just pop into my head, and like I'll like be
Mm.
doing other things, like I'll almost literally like walk into walls, like I'll just it like blinds me because I'm so into it in my own head. So that is kind of how I end up creating characters, both what I need them to do in the plot, what I need them to do interacting with each other, and just sort of them just powering through, cycling through conversations often that never make it into the book. But you
Ah.
just get a sense of kind of what they're like and how they might respond. So oh, there we go. Sorry, we got a little cut off.
No
Yeah,
worries.
so that's how I do it.
Fantastic. Well, shout out to Deanna. She was amazing. I was like, how is she going in and out all these, accents perfectly? She did an amazing job. So the second question, this is, it says, please ask Miss if, because he's proper, if her book will become a series or a movie, perhaps. And this is by the Supernatural Bear. This is by my son, who the entire time we thought he had headphones and was on his iPad listening to something else. But he told me that he had one ear out and was all about this book. So when I was like, oh, I'm going to interview, he's like, really? I want to ask a question. So that's his question.
I love that this was a family event. This is awesome.
We had a
That's
long road
wonderful.
trip. So I was like, this is perfect.
Yeah. And the question was whether it's going to be a series.
Series or movie, perhaps, he says.
Oh, yeah, I would love that, right? That'd be amazing. I do have a film and TV agent, so it's
Do the magic, do
circulating,
your magic.
circulating.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so it's wild. I mean, so many books, out there. People are like, "Oh, I'd love to see this as a movie," and you pretty much never do, because
Right.
they're so I would love that certainly. And in terms of sequels, for a lot of these things, it depends on how well it sells, right? So if
Right.
people are clamoring for a sequel and it sells really well, they say, hey, we're going to buy the next in this, and will you write another mystery? Because I would do that in a heartbeat, of course,
I bet.
but you kind of have to wait and see, how it goes. And, if it got picked up or optioned, that would help it along. But yeah, you always hope that, something will resonate with people enough that they want to see more of the characters. But yeah, you can only really write a sequel if somebody's willing to publish it. So we'll see.
Right. And as far as like a movie or a television series, I could if it happens, I hope it does because I would love to see the costumes,
Hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
think it would resonate with so many different people, and you could have, classic music plus current, contemporary music like a la Buccaneers. I don't know if you've seen that show that's on Apple TV.
I haven't.
Yeah, so it's based in kind of like the Gilded Age, but it's a little bit in the United States and then mostly in the UK.
Oh,
But
okay.
it's has contemporary music. And so it's fast, and there's like they're like teen girls, young girls or whatever. Yeah, you might like it. It's kind of like here and there, but it's pretty good. Like I got into it. Okay, so let's get into the not so rapid fire questions, the AKA slow as hell questions. Lauren, are you ready?
Yes, and if I don't answer, it's only because we're getting a little bit of delay. But yes, hopefully that works. Okay.
Got it. Okay. 3 words to describe yourself.
Oh, it's supposed to be rapid fire, huh?
That's why it's called
Oh, let's
AKA
see.
the slow as hell questions, because
The
sometimes it's slow.
yeah, yeah. Let's see. I would say dedicated.
Hmm.
And what's a adjective that means I read a lot?
A reader,
A reader.
voracious reader.
Voracious reader. Voracious reader. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, voracious reader.
Whether you're a creator, and I think what a lot of people don't understand is, you see a lot of t-shirts and memes talking about being still and doing nothing is part of the
Mm,
creative process, right?
absolutely.
As a creative doing so many different things in my lifetime, you need that, and if you look at old shows, even like Mad Men, they're at, creative executives, there's always a couch, you got to lay down, like you got to walk around, you got to do things, and it's about taking that break. And I think that is just for life in general. Like, so you're going to take on something big, or you just finish something big, you need to like decompress a little bit, process it, and then move on. Okay, so
Yeah.
Lauren, what song do you use to get you hyped when you need it? What's your go-to?
um, recently, this feels so basic. Recently, I've been listening to a lot of Taylor Swift songs.
You're a Swiftie.
It's
That's
just,
not basic. That's
I know.
fine.
It's just so like, it's just, you feel like you're like, it's not even, I mean, just on the bandwagon, I guess. Can't help it. I really like her music to get pumped up, for sure.
I
I
think you're
listen to
freezing
it,
again.
a lot of mornings, even just to wake myself up. Although I remember when I was taking, so I keep moving, so I have to keep taking bar exams in different states. And I remember when I was going to take the Texas bar, my pump up song was "Let It Go" from yeah. So I listened to that like literally like 400 times in a row, just non-stop. So the day, you get like 3 days of the bar or whatever, and every morning it'd be like an hour straight of Adina Menzel, like her name is, over and over again. So that one too,
That's
sometimes
crazy.
still.
So I'll be adding those songs to the Word to Your Mama guest hype list sound playlist, and so there'll be a link to that in the show notes so that everyone can hear all of our past guests, including yours, and yours will be moved up to the top. So,
Oh,
final
good.
question, Lauren, is what will be your legacy?
Oh, I don't think there will be. I mean, I mean, one of the things that I do a little bit of is collecting books, old books that, you know, no one's ever heard of the author. No, they're like mysteries. They're like old mysteries, and you've never heard of the author. who knows how much they publish. There's almost no information about them usually online. There's still a few copies of their hardbacks, rolling around from, 1928, but they're not classics. A lot of them are, just kind of normal, regular books. They're not bad, also not classics of the genre. And, most books disappear and most authors disappear. And, I have
Right.
some favorites from high school even. And, that was a while ago, but it wasn't so long ago that you wouldn't expect to, have the author. But no, there's like nothing on the authors. So I don't think it's important necessarily to have a legacy. I think some people, want that, especially people who maybe think of themselves as writing sort of a particular type of literature. But, my idea is to hopefully get people back into sort of the golden age of detective fiction. I hope young people, go back and read some of those books and think of their own twists on them and, think of puzzle solving and enjoy kind of the experience. And that's kind of, I'm trying to provide an entertaining and intriguing and engaging experience for teens. That's what I hope. And it doesn't have to last long for it to be a thing that, I'm glad I did.
Right. Well, I think you're already on your way because we thoroughly enjoyed it. As you can see, it was generational. We, as a,
Yeah, I'd love
in the
that.
household, we loved it. And, I loved that we were just, with those are my favorite type of mysteries as well. It's just like, it's not who they're trying to make it seem. Who do you think? And the entire time we're like, who do you think it is now? And then later on it shifts. It's like, well, I think it's this person now, but I don't know. There has to be a twist. Da, 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 da. And so it was a great time. Thank you so much for putting all your work and research and nerding out and, making something that just so happens to have, two amazing Latinas in it
Mm,
where it just so happens to. Do you know what I'm saying?
I
Where
do.
everyone can enjoy it, but there's that presence there, there's that history
Hmm.
there, there's that story and
Hmm.
authenticity of
Hmm.
that there is still a struggle, and the different levels of things. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being on Word to Your Mama. I really appreciate it and super excited for anything you have coming up. Let the folks know. Do you have something in the works or is it secret? And how can they find you? And whatever you say will also be in the show notes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's secret-ish. It hasn't been announced quite yet, but there is another YA murder mystery on the way. So we'll
Awesome.
yeah, see we'll get an announcement soon, hopefully. And I'm on socials, mostly on Instagram, Lauren Muñoz Books, and then I think maybe the same thing on Twitter, but I don't really I'm not on there that much. But yeah, Instagram, Lauren Muñoz Books. I think.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And, if you want to come back on to when you have the next book, let me know. Let's
I'd
do it
love
again.
that. Wonderful. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you.